He's a trauma doctor. He's quite well known, as you all know, I'm sure. He's the founder of the Disclosure Project, and he got into a lot of this stuff because his uncle designed the lunar module. He's also the founder of Space Energy Access Systems, which I understand is going to be a lot of the topic of today's presentation. So let's welcome Dr. Stephen Greer.
Thank you. You can have the lights up in here. I don't need it dark. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me here today. I'm really here for one purpose, and that is to share with you our vision of how to strategically get from where we are now as a terminal civilization to a sustainable civilization that can be around for a few 100,000 years. And I want to share this perspective and invite people who either are inventors or are points of contacts to inventors and who have technologies to reach out to us so that we can join together to make that future a reality. Now, I am not going to go into a lot of technical gobbledygook because I'm just a country doctor from Virginia. And my wife hooks up the VCR and the DVD and does all the stuff with the computer because I'll hurl it through the window. I'm not your technical guy. I'm your strategic guy. Our group is the leadership team. And this is something that happened over a course of about 17 years accidentally, perhaps, or by purpose. I don't know. My uncle designed, it's people who are old enough to remember the moon landing, but the younger ones, this funny looking thing that landed on the moon, looked kind of like a spider, called the lunar module. My uncle was the senior project engineer for that at Grumman. That company's now Northrop Grumman. And as a little kid, I knew about a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to know about. So my mother said, little pictures have big ears. And so it is true. And I recalled what I heard and started looking into and experiencing some things that are not allowed to be talked about in polite society. And a lot of it has to do with very advanced energy and propulsion systems and the technologies behind them. And of course, by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I knew that we didn't need internal combustion engines. And I knew we didn't need coal-fired power plants. And I knew we didn't need transmission lines. And I walked around the world thinking, why are we still using this crap? And came to realize that, of course, that the reasons behind it and the solutions that we're going to have to find are very related. And you cannot understand why 100 years after Nikola Tesla had improved free energy, or Stubblefield with his Earth battery had improved and used free energy, that we're still burning coal for 56% of the electricity in the United States like we were in the 1800s. There is a very big strategic challenge here, and that's what I really want to focus on. Because unless we can focus on that, all of these technologies that you may have heard about in the last 3 or 4 days, which I applaud the work of those who are sacrificing their life and their fortunes and their careers to make that happen, will be another tree that fell in the woods that nobody heard. And this we have to change. And you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, and still doing it over and over again and getting the same result. And so there are certain specific things that have happened over the last 100 years that you can do an ethnography for. You can back this up and look, why did Nikola Tesla's things disappear? How did it happen? Who did it? And why? Why are we still driving motor vehicles that are getting 15 miles per gallon when they could be getting 100? Absolutely true. Why? Well, and when the people who have these devices come forward, why isn't it on the front page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, etc.? It's because the hard work that has to parallel the engineering work on the strategic front, on the developing of the coalitions, of the network, of the societal and cultural and media support aren't there. And with that comes the funding. I think it's time for us to end the period, however heroic it is, of the amateur and professional unfunded energy research and development efforts in new energy and professionalize it with a $100 million capitalization for an entity to put the full resources of people out there who are concerned about the environment and energy and put their nose to the grindstone and say, here are the solutions. Are you going to support them? And if you don't, then we have a press conference that says Al Gore and his buddies want to talk about the problem but don't want to fix it. Because the resources are there, but you're going to have to organize the ability to strategically move this whole effort along. Now, you all know what I call affectionately Murder Incorporated has been working diligently to be sure these breakthroughs that you've heard about this weekend are not available to the general public and aren't known. And there's so much confusion about it, people don't know what to think. Even people who try to look into this field don't know what to think. And so the problem has been to get the clarity so that the masses become your support. And I want to outline a few things that I think can happen on the way to a technological breakthrough and the development of, say, a free energy motor or an energy-saving device or a magnetogravitic anti-gravity system that would put the Z-plane back into play as we travel around and get rid of the roads. All these technologies, or just one that saves enormous amounts of energy in an internal combustion engine. Any of those systems are going to be met with the same predictable set of resistances. And the resistances are linked to a $200 trillion asset base, of proven oil, gas, and coal reserves that 200 or 300 families and corporations own and control. And those are the folks who run the world. It isn't the people you elect, and it isn't the people you appoint. It's those folks. Newsflash. You can elect all the people you want to Washington, and they're going to sit up there and be the monkeys, chimpanzees that you see. And the bottom line is, they are not going to make this issue have a solution so long as the people feeding them through the back door are the same crowd, and they are. Make no mistake about it, this is a very steep mountain to climb, and we're not starting at base camp. We're starting at 20,000 leagues under the sea, and we've got to go to the top of Mount Everest. And we need to do it quickly, because this could have been done easily had Nikola Tesla's inventions and knowledge been used, developed, and applied 100 years ago, 70 years ago. If T. Townsend Brown's devices had been not classified and been allowed to come forward, we would not be using jet engines, we would not be using highways covering up most of our arable farmland, et cetera, and so on. However, it didn't. And it didn't for a set of reasons that we have to get our minds around. And there is this 8,000-pound gorilla sitting out there. And they have not, up till now, been willing to let go of the reins of power and go quietly into that dark night where they kiss goodbye their $200 trillion asset base, because they feel like they're kissing their asses goodbye, because these people live and thrive and their currency isn't money, it's power, and large amounts of it. Geopolitical power. Who runs the world? It's the big monkey game. And the problem has always been, how do you make this a win-win situation, or simply create an entity that moves it out because it has to change and those people will come in with you? That's what we're doing. It's interesting, in 1993, when I first had a briefing with President Clinton's CIA director, R. James Woolsey, he and I spent 3 hours discussing this and related problems. It was focused more on what the lay public call UFOs, but UFOs don't exist. There's no such thing as a UFO. They're not unidentified, they don't fly. Well, they're an object, but that's it. There are two categories, and everyone in the business knows it. Everyone at Lockheed Skunk Works in the compartmented area knows it. There are things that are called ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, that are man-made and are amazing, been zipping around since the 50s. And there are these things that are the NSA calls ETVs, extraterrestrial vehicles, and those do exist. So there are two categories of things, and neither one of them are UFOs, and everybody with a brain of sense knows it. But the problem was Clinton wanted to find out about all this stuff, and with it, the technologies that were behind it. I mean, look, that stuff isn't being kept secret because they think everyone's going to hurl themselves off a bridge because of little green men, or gray men, or whatever, or tall Nordic men, whatever. Am I scary? Anyway, it's been kept quiet because when they figured out the modus operandi, quoting from a Canadian top secret document from 1951, of how these objects worked, they realized, well, it's the end of the world as we know it. Don't need oil, don't need gas, don't need jet engines, don't need rockets. All these rocket scientists, everything they're doing, no more sophisticated than what Wernher von Braun had in the 40s and before 1945. Because I know what he worked on when he came to the States, because I know his spokeswoman. And my uncle, of course, as well. And so what you find is that we are arrested at least 50 years and maybe 100 years off our normal evolutionary track. And here's what happens in a macro system like Earth. When you resist the normal evolutionary course that I think is destined or intended to be, look at it as sort of a bigger universal plan, and you resist it, and you resist it, and you resist it, there are consequences. And now we're coming to the point of paying those consequences. Global warming, oil war number whatever, geopolitical conflict, enormous cartels with concentrated wealth when half the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. All of these problems, they cannot be fixed with the zero-sum system of linear internal combustion, fossil fuel-based energy systems. And solar and wind won't fix it either. What's the solution? Well, John knows them. Peter Lindemann knows them. Maury King knows them. We know what they are. Why don't we have them? Well, we're going to have to come together in an effort, a true professionalized R&D effort to move this forward. Because our political system simply are like deer caught in the headlights of this huge freight train coming down the tracks. I was meeting about 4 weeks ago with one of the men running for president of the United States. I won't say which party, doesn't matter. And we were having a discussion about this. And he said, well, if I become president, this will change because I'll see that these things are dealt with and this will be disclosed. And I said, really? This is what Al Gore and Bill Clinton said. He said, they did? I said, yes, I was their briefer. I was the son of a bitch that put the briefing packages together for the president and the vice president and his CIA director. And they put their tail between their legs, and here they go. Why? Bill Clinton's best friend came to my home after I spent 3 hours briefing the CIA director, and he said, well, he's very supportive of what you're suggesting, because I'd given him this white paper, which is in my first book. You can get it at disclosureproject.org. Disclosureproject, all one word, .org. And in this book, I have this document, and it was basically an analysis and recommendation that the president get control of these projects and disclose them. And I gave him the project code names, code numbers. You want 13452, go look it up. Ouch. Got any Intel people here? I know where they are. And so I gave all this stuff to the CIA director, and I said, look, you need to get, he says, well, at the end of this 3-hour meeting, he was virtually in tears, and he said, how do we disclose what we don't have access to? I said, well, you know, it's called executive power. And you have exactly the power you manifest. No more, no less. And that's true whether you're just a guy here in Utah, or the President of the United States, or a country doctor in Virginia. You have exactly the power to transform your life and this globe that you are willing to see and manifest. Well, President Clinton looked over the edge of that precipice and went, Mother of God, I'm not going to do it. So now he spends all his time on private jets giving lectures over in the oil sheik kingdoms with the billionaires and trillionaires and that club. That's true. Totally sold out. But his friend came to my home and sat at my dining room table. Now here I am working full-time as a trauma doctor, doing this crazy shuttle diplomacy. These are the early days. It was a nightmare. And trying to move this stuff forward. And this man, who was sort of a bag man for the Democratic Party and helped get Clinton launched, came to my home and he said, well, they're really very supportive, but they're convinced that if he does what you're recommending, he'll end up like Jack Kennedy. And I burst out laughing. I thought this had to be joking. He stopped me. He said, and my children were at the table. I have 4 daughters, and God bless them. And what a ride for them. They looked at me, and my wife looked at me, and he said, no, we're serious. We don't believe the president will survive an attempt to make these things come out. I said, well, he's the president. And what do you want me to do? I'm a country doctor running this trauma center. You know, this is 30,000 patients a year in what I call the Gun and Knife Club. And he said, well, they're not going to do it. So then we went to the people in Congress, and I briefed Senate Intelligence here in Nevada, where Area 51 is. Quack, quack, boring, old facility. Interesting stuff there at S4, S9, S12. But this guy who's on Intel, Senate Intel, says, well, I can't do this if the president won't. I said, yes, you can. You took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. And he just looked away. He averted his eyes. He says, well, maybe you should go talk to John Warner. I said, Senator Warner's on this committee and has been for decades, keeping all this stuff secret. He says, he is? I said, yes. You want the names of them? I'll give them. Boom, 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 boom. We know who they all are. Met with a lot of them. So he says, well, I can't do it. I'm just a senator from Nevada. All right, this is the line. Get the picture? Fast forward. A few months ago, former Minister of Defense for Canada, Paul Hellyer, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, who's now on our team, and I'm advising him, and he's going to write a book that has information on this on it. And we're actually in the cabinet of a couple of the prime ministers in Canada, including Trudeau. And he said, look, we did a press conference up in Toronto. He said, there are 2 governments. There's the government we elect and appoint, and there's a permanent government. And they're the ones who really call the shots. They print the money. They do all this. And he says, when I was Minister of Defense, I didn't know anything of all this stuff was going on, even though Canada has a very key component to it, and has had for 50 years at least. So in this dysfunctional nexus of political, cultural, financial, how do you get a breakout moment, which is what we need? Well, we have that moment. It has arrived. Because at least half of the ruling kleptocracy, these 200 or 300 folks on this committee who run all this stuff, want it ended. They want the secrecy ended. Now, when I first met with Woolsey, I was told it was about 1/3, which is why I got that far. Now it's over half. The entire Masonic component, and Knights Templar kind of became the sort of Mason group in Europe, have broken away from the U.S. component. And the entire European continent is now on our side of this argument, in toto, including the club, with whom I am meeting. They want this done. Now, what do we got to do? We've got to put something in front of them that's not snake oil. We've got to put something in front of them that can be vetted. No black box games. We've got to put something in front of the world and say, these technologies work, and we're going to insist that we get the support. It's not just about money, but the support to make this move. So what we have done over the last 15 years is to build the network to make that happen. And what we're doing, and I'm announcing today for the first time publicly, is that this entity, SEAS, we're going to put aside, and we're starting a new entity called Advanced Energy Research Organization, AERO. And AERO is going to be the arrow the vehicle that's going to move these things forward. And it's going to do so because we have figured out the strategic way to do it. It isn't by keeping it in your garage or in your secret hideout. Now, let me back this up a little bit and go through some of the things that are predictable mistakes that inventors and engineers and small groups of people with limited resources and networks have done. Mistake number one, they think they're going to keep it secret and therefore they're going to be safe. Wrong, big mistake. By the time you've had the thought come out of your neural complex, the guys you've got to know about know you got it. Absolutely. And they're going to come after you like a Rottweiler with a hard-on, excuse my French, unless you are willing to step out and in a way that is massive all at once. You've got to have the ability to do it. Obscurity is enemy number one for the new energy inventor. Obscurity. Do not be obscure. Don't be cute. Don't think you're going to fool these guys. They know where you are. They know what you're doing. And as long as you're no threat to the status quo, meaning the problem isn't solved, they don't give a big flying flip. However, if you start to move in a direction where it would be, here they come. And they're going to do one of two things. First, a couple goons will show up and say, "This is a matter of the national security." Now, I was approached by that group when I was doing the disclosure project. I said, really? My constitutional attorneys and I have analyzed this. And since you're lying to the President of the United States and the Chairman of the Intelligence Committee and to this and to that and to the other thing, you are a criminal enterprise. A priori, you cannot cite the National Security Act of 1947 or any other law of this country to stop me. So you can send me your Title 35, Section 180, 181, cease and desist from the Patent Office, and I will go on Wolf Blitzer's television show and tear it up. Watch me do it. You want to put the bracelets on? Let's get on the dance floor. Come on. Now, I really got into a pissing match with this one character who was a spook. And I had a document that was, someone took it from the NSA vaults, 1962 document, smoking gun. It's in our book. Get it, read it. Top secret, not declassified. Of course, you're not supposed to spread those around. But see, we had already determined and notified all the branches of the US government that this whole group running these projects were unconstitutional, illegal, and could not use the rule of law to suppress anything. And people said, well, how did you do that? I said, we just notified them under a UNOD directive, unless otherwise directed. It's done in the military all the time. And I said, unless otherwise directed, we have discovered that this group is an illegal operation. We are therefore soliciting the testimony from people with sworn security oaths, documents, material, and information, methods and sources, which we will disclose to the public. We gave them 6 months to respond. No government agency dared respond, because we could prove that we had already briefed the president and the CI director and they were clueless. And then we did it. So at the National Press Club on May 9th, 2001, 6 years ago, we had 22 military guys talking about what they had seen, and then another 110 on digital videotape, and transcripts. And you can see all this. It's all on the internet, disclosureproject.org. It's been one of the most watched things on the internet. Tens of millions of people seeing this press conference. What happened, of course, the first hour of it was electronically jammed by the National Security Agency or some no such agency, but then it got out there, and there was nothing they could do about it. Yes, it was on CNN and got pulled down, and it was in the Washington Times, and then the Washington Post made fun of it, and then it was on the BBC International, but they sanitized it in the US market, and the whole media game unrolled, and we mapped it out and saw who was who and who was what and what they were going to do. We were beta testing the system for you. It was beta tested. We know who the good players are, and we know who the shills who are on the payroll of the secret government are. Joel Achenbach, Washington Post, on the payroll. That's simple. And there are good actors and bad actors. Ira Rosen is the main executive producer, CBS 60 Minutes, good player. And you get us something that passes primetime muster, it will be on 60 Minutes. Because he's been at my home and dined at my table. The network we have put together is unprecedented in the last 100 years. This is the network Tesla needed to have. This is the network T. Henry Moray needed to have, and Moray King needs to have. This is the network, okay, and that is what is lacking and has been, is the strategic leadership and network to put a protective umbrella around this thing and move it out, because you're not doing anything in secret anymore. Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, said 3 things before he died of cancer to our group. 1, there are no private conversations anywhere on earth. That is correct. By means that I won't go into, but they're extraordinary. And forget carnivore and echelon and that stuff. That's old junk. Number 2, whatever you can imagine, they've already done at Lockheed Skunk Works. Star Trek stuff, time, space, whatever, boom. And number 3, he said, we already have the means, technologies, to travel among the stars, but those technologies are locked up in a black box, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Well, you know what? We collectively are that act of God. And he died wishing this could come out. And there are so many people who know about what we're doing and who now want to get behind something that'll make a difference, because they know that our civilization is at V1. Any pilots in here? V1. Here you go. You're down the runway. V1 is when you rotate, go up, or shut the engines down because you're running out of runway space. Our civilization is just fresh out of runway. So we're going to have to take off and go or shut it down. And the earth shall cast off her burden if we don't lift it. And easy would have been 100 years ago. Difficult, 1950s, very difficult. Promethean, extremely difficult is now. But it can be done. It can be done because it must. Human civilization has no future living the way it is. And as the Chinese saying goes, unless we change directions, we're likely to end up where we're going. Nobody's looking at where we're going. We're heading over Niagara Falls without a barrel. So all of us together can change that direction. But it's going to take a lot of organization, and a lot of professionalization, and a lot of network. Now, the people, the short list of people who stand ready to help us do this are 2 people running for the presidency of the United States with whom I'm working. One of whom, who's pretty high up there in the polls right now, is best friends with one of my military witnesses and whistleblowers in the Disclosure Project. And in our little chats, what we have found is that there's a lot of willingness to do it, but they don't want to be first. Here's the problem. In America, and in the Pentagon, and in Capitol Hill, and in the White House, for the most part, everybody wants to be first to be second. See? Everybody wants to be first to be second. What does that mean? Everybody wants to let someone else stick their necks out and make this thing happen, and then they'll jump on and go, yes, what a great idea. Oh, what a wonderful solution, and now I'll be elected the President of the United States. Or whatever their ambitions are. I don't have that kind of ambition. I could care less. What I do care about is that we not recapitulate the errors of the last 100 years by keeping these technologies shrouded in secret on a low-key basis where the only people who know about them are your enemies. Who are your friends? The other 99.9999999999999% of the world's population, they're your friends. You know, Bubba with the pickup truck and the gun rack and his F-150 that costs $80 to fill it up now. You think he wants to pay $80 for gas? No, he doesn't. They're all your friends. You don't know what friends you have. The whole world is watching and waiting for this to happen. Use it. Now, that's easier said than done. Someone says, well, yeah, you can put it on the internet. Well, there's so much rubbish on the internet, you can't, ugh. It's like garbage in, garbage out, and it's trillions of bytes of rubbish floating around, and a gem occasionally comes out. It's useful, but it's not the answer. You've got to have prime mover capability. Now, let me talk about what prime mover capability is. Not prime numbers. I'm not a mathematician. I'm only a country doctor from Virginia, and I don't do mathematics, except doses of medicines. But I will say this. You have got to have a group of people around you that is this AERO. That's why I named it, Advanced Energy Research Organization. It's like an arrow that is the vehicle that strategically protects the inventor, protects the device, and is going to go through any difficulty, pierce any veil, persist through any resistance, including Murder Incorporated, threats, legal games, and the one that works the best, the golden carrot. Most of these technologies have gone the way of all flesh because someone in the group that analyzes this and is keeping it secret figures out what her price is. What is her price? I bet for $50 million she'll give me that control of that thing. Now here's a big problem, because you need funding to make this happen. But the money people can't control it. Why? Because they're money people. Now, I mean no offense to anyone who's wealthy in here. I mean, I've pretty much retired at this stage, and I don't care about income because I took care of my family and myself, and the good thing too, I got a daughter going to Yale grad school next year, and one going to Stanford, and one going to Stanford Law School, one getting her PhD at UCSF in genetics and biological research, and one going to be a school teacher. And I've now devoted my whole life to doing this. But most people who do these things as investments want to control that investment. And here's the problem. Can't be done, won't happen, won't ever happen. Now, this is an astonishing part of the problem. Trap number two. Number one is obscurity. It's going to get you killed, and your thing is going to be the thing that fell in the woods, nowhere to do it. You got to move it into a strategic group and get it out. If it's not headline news, it's a disaster. Number two, you cannot let the money people control the strategy. Why? Well, here's a good example. I know someone a few months ago came up with one of these, what Maury King was talking about, one of these energy systems that liberated Brown's gas from water. By the way, this has been done for decades. But the key, by the way, in all that is the resonant frequency, a specific resonant frequency that with very low signal input splits those bonds. And this can be done. It's been done by multiple people over the years. I have no doubt about it. And your car could be running essentially on water, wastewater from your, not your toilets, but from your sinks and showers. Absolutely. Every home uses enough wastewater to run your house and car forever. True. And we have the engines already running. A little bit of modification, and that's it. Why don't we have it? Well, this guy was offered 20 years of profits in a lump sum after the goons had shown up in the suits and said, this is a national security issue because you'll disrupt the economic interests of blah, blah, blah. So there was the stick. Here came the golden carrot. They took it. Huge mistake. Now, of course, he got a lot of money. Bully for him. But the earth is going down the toilet. So you can only count your millions for so long when both polar ice caps are melting. All right? We're headed for a catastrophe. And I think it's time for people to step back and look at the big picture and say, what do we need to do? Now, luckily, we have identified sources of qualified funders. I don't use the word investors. I hate it. Not that these things couldn't be lucrative. They may be someday. But you want funders, and preferentially someone who do it on a grant basis. Why? Now, there's one family I'm dealing with, and they have three $250 million environmental grants. And they have a private jet and this and that. And, you know, they're desperate to see a way to fix the environment. Desperate. Why can't we put these things in front of them? And why don't we? That's what we have to do. That's what AERO has to do. These people will walk the walk, and they don't care about the money, because if you can blow $750 million into your environmental trusts, your other billions are sitting somewhere else. They don't need the money. Now, what they won't do is take the risk. This is where risk-averse psychology has to be analyzed. And let me analyze this for a moment. This is a really huge issue. It's not risk because you're going to lose your money. They don't care about the money. They don't want to lose their lives. So this has to be done in a way where it is detargeted. The worst thing is to have this thing, a technology that's efficacious and can be proven as so, as an N of one. You know, in scientific, N1, just one of them, a one-off thing. Oh, no, 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 no. You got to have a few dozen of them, and they got to be in the right hands. And preferably, Steven Seagal, who wants to run his home on one of these, I don't know if you know this, has his home running on it. There are a whole lot of celebrities that I'm working with. You know, so even if they shut down CNN, its own people, us, everything else. This is the network we've built. You think you don't need those people? You do. And I don't mean Lohan or Paris Hilton, but I mean, but you know, the media gobbles that stuff up. Yum, 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 yum. You know, dumb, 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 down. However, that can be used. See, what you do is like a keto. You take whatever is going on and you use it to your advantage. That's what you got to do. So use it. They're there. These are humans who put their pants on one leg at a time, and they want an environmental solution, and they would love to see free energy. And we know who they are because we're meeting with them. Now, how do we get all these elements put together? This is what AERO is intending to do. Advanced Energy Research Organization is going to be purely research and development to take whatever the state-of-the-art that we can find as of this month and move it into a beta-testable, UL-listed thing that can run the world. But there will be a 100 trillion watt spotlight on that effort from get-go one. And we're not talking an internet press release. You know, if you don't have at least 3 PR firms at $50,000 per month on retainer, so this thing is on all the news, you're not going to make it through the people shutting down the news entities, because that's what they do. And you better be prepared to engage a satellite to do this, which we will do. So you have got to be able to do that in a robust way. The machine needs to be robust, but so does the effort to roll it out, because then the world has some hope. And it isn't based on some rumor, but this is something that you've had Nobel Prize winning physicists vet, because we know them. There's a man in France who won the Ampere Prize, A-M-P-E-R-E. It's a very prestigious electromagnetic, and he is working with us intimately. I just got a letter from him. Well, though you get those guys, and they put their imprimatur on this. Point, set, match. Now, the problem with the money people is that they do look at this. They're not stupid, and they kind of know how the game is played. And they say, well, would this be dangerous? Oh, yes. You want to be safe? Stay home, eat Cheetos, and watch Jay Leno. You know, but if it's not something that you have the control over, that risk is shifted to those who do. I'm willing to take that risk. Dr. Loader's willing to take that risk. Ambassador McDonald is willing to take that risk. A close friend of Jimmy Carter's who's on our team. Paul Hellyer will take that risk. There are famous, but also infamous people who will take that risk. Larry Flint of Hustler will do a full-page spread. Why? Because he just did on the Disclosure Project. I don't read that magazine. Rather do it than see it. But hey, you use everything to get the message and the truth out there. Now, the money people do have that concern because they have seen bad things happen. I'll give you an example. There's a guy who's a billionaire who has helped fund some of the disclosure project work, and he they have 5 private jets and all this stuff and a 160-foot yacht, and what he blows out of his teletype is G5 would run the entire project we need to do. And I said, look, these energy researchers need funding, serious funding. And he said, oh no, it's too dangerous. And this guy's in his 80s, and I'm going, oh my God, you're rich and you're in your 80s, who cares? But he was scared. And he says, well, back in the 60s, I knew the head of General Motors that had a complete free energy car. He said this, would have used no petrol, no gas. This is the late 60s. And he told him privately, because they were friends. And this guy, you go to his home with pictures of him and Ronald Reagan's and pictures of him and all these industrial. And he said, but 2 weeks later, they found him dead of an apparent suicide. But he says, that man was not suicidal. They killed him. I said, yes, I know. Murder Incorporated killed 3 people on my team and former CI director Bill Colby before I got the security nexus in place to keep me alive. And it's in place, or I wouldn't be here breathing the free air of Salt Lake City. Now, this is no small feat. It's dangerous, and it has worked because we're the canary in the mine shaft. And I had a guy come up to me who said, Dr. Greer, I've been watching what you've been doing for years in naval intelligence spook. He says, I don't know why you're not dead yet. That's the first thing out of his mouth. I said, well, I do. We have our own methods and sources. Okay, so the white hats, the people who want the truth out, need to understand that we can put those protective resources in place, and they are in place. They're absolutely in place, or I could not have gotten this far. You don't go into meetings with the head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, which is what I do, and give briefings on this and disclose project code names and what have you dealing with this stuff, and walk out and live to tell the tale. They want to, because you've got people behind you that if anything happens to you, they're going to take them out. These are like a mafia. So we have an enormous support group. Go back to what I said. At least half, and I think more than half, of this ruling kleptocracy that has kept this stuff secret now want it done. But they don't want to step out and do it because they want to be first to be second. Plus, if they do it, the whole scandal of their fingerprints on the secrecy and the suppression will be there. They need a clean entity to do it. Perhaps a sacrificial lamb. Maybe I'll do that for them. So you cannot have the funding people with legal control over the entity or the technologies, because they will or the legal, or the business people. Why? Well, here's a good example. One man who had said, I had $50 million he wanted to put into something like this. It was discretionary money for a fund he had because it was a multi-billion-dollar fund. And I said, well, that would help. And he said, but we need 60 or whatever it is percent because it's venture capital. I said, oh no, you'll get 10 or 25 or something, or preferably none. Do it as a business grant for the world. He looked, he says, well, that's not how this is done. I said, that's how this is going to be done. And he said, well, why? I said, well, let me answer your question with a question. You put 50 million in this and you have 60% control. And there are too many inventors who've made these kind of things happen. It's a disaster. Murder Incorporated comes to this guy and says, this is a technology of the national security interest. We'll go to jail if you don't shut this down. And the guy goes, oh my God, because he's a businessman. He just wants money. I mean, his whole life is money. And then somebody who's a shill, pimping for the energy sector, comes to him and says, look, I will give you $5 billion for that, the rights to this technology. He just paid $50 million in investment. So that's 100 to 1 return in, say, a year. And I said, what would you do? And he said, well, I'm a businessman, I'd sell. I said, no, you're a money whore. And you've just sold, the difference, you've just sold the future of Earth for 2 pieces of silver. And this is what's been going on for 100 years. We have got to stop making these same mistakes. The new energy efforts have made these same fatal errors. And you can do an ethnography, and I've talked to Tom Bearden while I was sitting at his home, going back 100 years, and can just absolutely predictable. Inventor paranoia, keeping it very secret, being obscure, getting into business deals with all kinds of horrific characters who then take it or sell it or do whatever, or black shelve it at GM or Hughes Aerospace or whatever. There are certain predictable things that have happened over and over and over and over again. Nor should you think you're going to bring this out in some sly, incremental way, and they won't notice. I hear this from inventors all the time. Well, we'll do it on a small scale. We'll run a generator up in the Yukon. I see you think they're not going to know that. I mean, there's this crushing and almost sweet naivete that goes with these strategic plans around these new energy efforts. And we need to say, childhood's end, let's grow up, let's pull our resources and make a strategic push into this good future that we can manifest, because we can make this happen. It absolutely can be done. I am not fatalistic about it, and I don't think anyone should be. There are a lot of discouraged people. I know there are people in this room who've worked for 20, 30, 40 years with some of these things and never see them go anywhere, and it gets discouraging. I do think that we're at a moment that's different from the 60s and 80s and 90s and even 5 years ago. Good news. The cabal overplayed its hand in Iraq. Now, I say that with a sense of horrible, being a trauma physician, of terrible tragedy of the men and women who've died over there. But, by the way, those of you who think that it was just mismanaged, no. No. Let me explain how the game is played. France and Russia were about to lift the sanctions through the UN on the second largest oil field in the world. The price of oil was $25 to $30 a barrel. When that was the case during the Clinton years, oil went to about $8 a barrel, $12 a barrel, $15 a barrel. By going into a country and creating planned chaos, it's like planned obsolescence when you buy a light bulb or GM car. But it's planned chaos. You could take effectively that region, create enough chaos, and guess what? The price of a barrel of oil went from 25 to 30 to 70 something. This is an accident? Well, no, because to pull the stuff out of the ground in Saudi Arabia is still $2 or $3 a barrel. But instead of selling it for 25 or 30, it's going for 70. Geez, and march all the way to the bank with trillions more. The whole thing, no one is that stupid. Believe me, Rumsfeld, Cheney, the people who did, they're not stupid people. Cunning, Machiavellian, corrupt, stupid? No, not stupid. Very bright. Now, we have to be, for a good purpose, for the right reasons, equally bright and equally deep in our analysis of what's going on. Because here's what you're really playing with these technologies. Currently, the great white father, America and Europe, 600 million people, 10% of the world's population, completely control the entire geopolitical scene. Completely. What happens when his device, I'm just pretending I don't know you from Adam's apple, but he has a motor, and it can be done through this pathway, and it has this breakout, and Steven Seagal's using it, and Ambassador so-and-so's using it, and it's all in the media, and there's a $100 million P&A campaign, Princeton advertising campaign that comes in behind it. Well, suddenly you have this thing running villages in Africa. So sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, India, all over the world. Even the deserts shall bloom because you can desalinate water with no energy cost and pump it to wherever you want because the pumps are free energy. Boom. It's almost biblical. Well, how wonderful for the masses of humanity. How terrible if you're the ones in this geopolitical pulling the levers, like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. These old guys behind there pulling the curtains. Because suddenly, you have not only decentralized power generation, which is what all the engineers talk about, you've decentralized power, geopolitical power in the world, completely. Because your geopolitical power is a direct result not of your population. If that were the case, India and China, with their 2.5 billion people, would be the geopolitical powerhouses. It comes from your economic prowess and technological abilities. Those two things. Suddenly, we have to put a seat at the geopolitical table for all the people of the world. This is the biggest geopolitical change in the history of recorded human society. Bar none, that's what you're dealing with when you're tinkering with this technology. And if you don't get that, you're going to step into every landmine that's been put out there by Murder Incorporated, and you will not make it out of your garage. So this is the analysis that I wanted to share. And what I want to offer to do is to help. And I mean this when I say, we will do this, blood, sweat, and tears. There is no threat, personally as the head of AERO and as C's, that will be directed to us that will cause me to back down. Not legal, not financial, no inducement, don't care about the money. And if they want to threaten me physically, watch out. You know, 2 weeks before the Disclosure Project event happened, and you know, the National Press Room Ballroom was packed, the whole back of it with 22 network cameras. Every network of any significance in the world was there. And the people watching what we were doing were going, oh God. Because I started ramping it up on some sort of fringe media shows like Coast to Coast AM, and then some other media and this and that, and so everyone was I was told by the head of the National Press Club it was the most watched event in the history of the National Press Club on the internet. Now, what happened is that as we did this, people became very concerned that we were succeeding. So I got called over to this think tank near the Pentagon. You know, all the action. It's like I was talking to Senator Claiborne Pell, and he said, I've been wanting to know about these things since I got into Congress in 1950. I said, yes, but you're in the wrong tank. The electronically ease-proof tank that they take you in on the Hill ain't where none of this is talked about. Ain't never going to happen. Never. It's over at the 7th floor of the Xerox building in Arlington. He looked at me. He said, really? I said, yeah. Well, they move it around. So, true. It's corporate. Corporate. So, basically, you know, I said, you've got to realize, this group was saying, you know, what the hell are you doing? I said, you got to realize we're going to do this. We've told you, no secret about this. It's going to happen. And there was a former admiral there and some other spooks, and the whole room I was in was all glass, and it was kind of cameras behind it and people behind it. It was a very interesting experience. And I said, but you know, you may not help us, but you need to stand down. Get out of the way. Because if you so much as call a single one of my military witnesses, whistleblowers, because they're given testimony about things they had signed a national security oath over, if you threaten them, if I step off the curb in Washington, where I have one of my homes, and get hit by a bus, you are all dead men walking. You will not survive that takedown, because there's a group behind us that have vowed to watch our backs and see this through. And they looked at me. You could hear a pin drop in the room. And I'm telling you, this is true. And so that's why we're still, now I don't have anything to do with that. There's a guy that visits me, and he says, up until 1998, he would visit me every year. He says, do you want executive security protection? I said, no, I don't want to do that. Then they killed my best friend and closest assistant. Then they killed a member of Congress who was helping me. All three of us got metastatic malignant cancers within the same month, and all of them died but me. I'm the only one still living. Then they killed Bill Colby, because he was to hand off the money and one of these energy devices fully operational to us. And the week he was going to meet with my board, they found him floating down the Potomac River, and I said, enough. So I went to this guy and I said, make it happen. It's like Jean-Luc Picard on the Enterprise. Just make it so. Do you know, 6 years later, I have never received a phone call threatening me. Not a single one of these men who had top secret SCI, Special Compartment Intelligence clearances, current, some of them, ever got a phone call, a visit, a threat. That's the umbrella we put together. Now, you can use it or not, but if you want to go this alone, Godspeed, God bless you. But I am offering, we will do this, and we will do it right, and we will do it with full commitment of our souls, our minds, our bodies, blood, sweat, and tears. But we need a couple things. No more games. If you got something, it's going to have to be evaluated. Don't put it on a black box. Here, it's under the table. You can't look at it. But trust me, it's putting out free energy. No. Forget it. Or it's running here, but I can't show. It's going to have to be something that truly gets professionalized. It's going to have to be vetted, and here's the requirement. On-site test, then off-site test, and we can get a private jet to move it. Then it's going to have to be reproducible. Why? Because we have found people have created some of these things, but they weren't really technical scientists. They were tinkerers. They didn't know what they do to make it work, so they could not reproduce the effect. That is true. That's happened several times. So it has to have reproducibility. This is called science. If it's not reproducible, it's worthless. Then, if it passes reproducibility, it will go into multiple, quick, one-off, custom, and will be in safe storage. And there will be a massive disclosure event, and I mean massive. One of the key people on the House Energy Committee, I was flying with him somewhere last year, a couple years ago, and he says, I've heard these things exist. I've always wanted to see one. If one actually exists, would you bring it into the House chamber? I said, if you can get it through security, I can land it at DCA, because they reopened it to private general aviation, private planes. I said, I'll bring it to DC if you can get it into the I know we can, because we had some of these tested at the Naval Research Labs, and we got it through their security. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not real subtle. So, you know, you can be subtle sometimes, but you got to move this stuff. And you don't wait. Time is your enemy. Obscurity is your enemy. These financial games where the investors want to control this, that's your enemy. The people who need to be running this are the people who know the science and know the technology, and their strategic team who are going to go the distance. And you know, when Ambassador Jim George, I was with him in a Hawaii meeting with one of these brilliant inventors who had holed himself up in one of the little islands there with his technologies, never for the world to be seen. He wanted to be the tree that fell in the woods nobody heard, because he had had a friend who was killed in the process of trying to do this. And on the way back, Ambassador George, who was an ambassador from Canada, he was the guy who brought the Dalai Lama out to the West, I don't know, and he wrote all the early environmental books. And he's a wonderful man. He looked at me right in the eyes. He says, I will take a bullet for you and for this if we can get this done. Those are the people we're working with. These are the people, it's like the guys in the Marines and the Secret Service that I know that will jump in front of a bullet. You've got to have that as your vanguard. You know, your limp-wristed, I hate to say it, you know, financial class and the lawyers and the MBAs and all that crap, they are not going to go the distance on this. You need your spirit warriors. You need your people who are going to say, we're going to do this no matter what the threat matrix, and we have strategies, Aikido, many of them, very counterintuitive, to get around it. You don't beat darkness of secrecy by becoming a little secret thing yourself. You get out there. Now, in 1990, when I first had the idea to start the effort disclosure project and all this, there was a national security attorney. I was at a meeting with a bunch of guys, and he said, you know, they're going to kill you, just like that. He said, you will absolutely not survive what you're planning to do. He said, unless you do one thing. I said, what? He said, don't walk, run to where there are millions and millions and millions of people who know who you are. Because this group, this shadowy, weird group, they thrive in the darkness of secrecy. It's almost an aphrodisiac for them. They're twisted. They love secret power. But if there's a 1 trillion-watt spotlight on an operation, you think they want to walk into that? I don't think so. That's why when that spook said, what are you doing with this document? You can go to jail. I said, come on, come on, come on, come on. Put the handcuffs on. I'd like to go to jail. Because my first call isn't going to be to a shyster. It's going to be to Larry King, or it's going to be to one of these media people. Country doctor in Virginia goes to jail with top secret document exposing the fact that James Jesus Angleton ordered to hit on Marilyn Monroe to keep her secret from talking about what crashed in New Mexico in 1947. That's what the document is. You think they're going to do that? Come on, they're not. So besides the fact that you have these people who are supporting this effort now, at least on a security level, you've got millions of people, because of the overplaying of the hand in Iraq, who knows that there's something nefarious going on with the energy, oil, military-industrial complex, that whole sector. There's something that doesn't smell right. The man on the street, that's why Bush has 20-some% approval ratings. They don't know the details because the media doesn't give them the details, but they intuitively know something is wrong. They know something is wrong. And so you have that to use. You have the masses of people to use. And most importantly, we have each other. We're going to have to come together as a group who understands our strengths and our limitations. Now, this is the part of the talk people don't like to hear. And you know, and I'm an emergency doctor, so if you come in and you have a brain tumor, I don't tell you got a migraine. You know, I'm the guy that says, I'm sorry to inform you, you've got an inoperable, potentially fatal brain tumor in the brain stem or something. Tough thing to do. That's what I've done in my life. None of my life hasn't been easy. So one thing that you don't want to hear is that you can't do this alone. Now, when it comes to electromagnetic stuff, I'm an idiot. I wouldn't know a jewel from a comb, from a this, from a that. I do. But I mean, I'm not an electronics guy. But I know what I can do. And I don't think many inventors and engineers can pull this strategic nexus together and make it run, to make a vehicle, to make their machine something that actually is running the planet. To do that, you're going to have to rely on a lot of people. And what I've done in my past 15 years of doing this is to pull the best people who have the cleanest records and who are willing to go the distance, face any threat, make any sacrifice, up to and including giving their lives to make this happen. And if they're not at that level, they're not qualified. They're not a qualified investor. They're not a qualified advisor. They're not a qualified employee. They're not qualified. That's the qualification. Are you willing to go the distance? But you don't have to do all that yourself. Here's the tragedy. A lot of these brilliant people who have been working on this and who are really, you know, when they start telling me this stuff and thin film capacitance and this, I mean, I go, it's like, I don't know half of what they're talking about. What do I look like? I mean, you know, I'm a country doctor who ran a trauma center for 10 years. I'm a medical doctor. But what has happened? Hello? Is that something we need to do? Oh, I don't know what that was. What was I talking about? But we can't do this alone. I can't do it alone. You can't. So we have to find out, however, what we're strong in and go with our strengths. Not everyone can do everything. Why do we have to feel that we all have to do everything? This is neurotic. God has given each of us our gift. And it doesn't matter if it's a gallon measure or a thimbleful or whatever it is we can do, let's join together and make it happen. And you have to then take a stock of your own self. You know, as it says, know thyself, and to thine own self be true. So you have to know what your strengths are, who you are, spiritually, mentally, physically, intellectually, and what your capabilities are, and go with those strengths. There's no way to make this transformation of the planet from its cruel addiction to the earth-killing and human-killing fossil fuel and oil nexus of power and energy. To make that transformation happen, we're going to have to rely on all of our abilities. And I don't have them. I mean, I'm not a PR specialist, and I'm certainly not an engineer. I mean, I can't fabricate anything. And as I said, I can't even hook up my DVD. My wife has to do it. I mean, I'm an idiot with stuff like that. But I know, you know, so you need to know where you're strong and where you're not. The problem is that you will get many people who are brilliant with their physics and engineering, and they think they're going to be brilliant strategically, media, communication, leadership, finance, this, that. They're not. 1 in 1,000 technologies have someone who actually did the technical work who also was able to bring it forward. And I've talked to people who brought out the laser systems and the this and the that. It just doesn't happen. So I think that we have to understand and take stock of ourselves and understand that we need to pull together. What I want to do with Advanced Energy Research Organization, AERO, is to create this vehicle and an umbrella of protection and security that can swiftly take anything that has potential and move it through the various iterations of development so that it can then be ready for prime time. If it's already ready for prime time and it's sitting on this desk running and it's free energy, it doesn't have to be ready to be sold. It just has to be something that can be tested, proven, reproduced, so there's reproducibility, and secured, and then it's out. And it will be. Take my word for it. If we had, it was estimated between 300 and 500 million people between the Voice of America live satellite, the internet, CNN and the BBC hear about what we did with the Disclosure Project with a $150,000 total budget for that operation. What can we do with 100 million? 50 to 100, which is what's being offered. If there's something to put that protection around, I know we can do this. Now, and when we do, guess what? Our children, and I'm here missing today, my grandson's 2nd birthday. Our grandchildren, yes, I'm a grandfather. People go, you're a grandfather? How scary. A grandfather that benches 410. Anyway, that's even scarier. But what I feel is that we need to say, what are we leaving to our children and our children's 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 children? You know, this dust heap, you know, this civilization, this terminal. When we have these wondrous new sciences and technologies that are here, and we can create the world of our dreams. We can create a world that's sustainable, abundant, peaceful, that has justice in it because there's no longer the zero-sum game that enforces poverty on 80% of the world's population. All of this we can make happen in our lifetime, in the next few years, certainly in the next 20, but we're going to have to combine to do it. And any of you who can help us, whether it be strategic, media, technical, engineering, if you know someone who's out in the mountains somewhere with one of these things that you think really does work, please contact me, and we will try to get it evaluated. Because we feel that we are really seriously running out of time. From 1991, when I first talked to Bruce De Palma, to now, I have watched various inventors and people come and go, and it has never broken out. We can do that. Because if we got 300 million people to hear and see about the Disclosure Project, believe me, when people hear there's a replacement for oil and gas and coal and the solution to the global warming and environmental problem and the poverty problems of the world, the whole world will be watching. You'll have 5 billion people will hear about it, 6 maybe. Everyone within earshot of a transistor radio. So that's what needs to happen. And we can do it if we work together, and I hope that we can. And I know that if we join our forces and our resources and our God-given gifts, that we can make the world of our dreams a reality very soon. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Greer. Raise your hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen will be in the building for a while, and he will be taking questions out in the foyer.
Yes, I'll be.
Stephen will be here for an hour or two at least this afternoon, and he'll be out in the hallway on this side in the foyer if you want to spend some time with him, especially if you have a feeling or a thought that about a particular technology or have access to it that you think could make a difference. He wants to hear from you.
I'm actually be here till tomorrow morning.
How do we contact you?
I'll give you my card, or you can get on seizpower.com for now.
His site is up here. If you look up on the top here, and we're going to go to company officers here,
But I'll be around till Monday morning.
and
not file.
there's Stephen Greer, doctor right there, and there's all his information and his bio and the whole thing. Okay, it's SEAS Power, seaspower.com, SEAS Power.com. And if you think you can make a difference, Stephen Greer wants to work with you. Okay, for the afternoon breakout section, the financial from 1 to 3.